complied with by the respondent. My well-considered opinion that as at the 6th of July 2022, having withdrawn his nomination and personally served him on the second respondent of the withdrawal of nomination of on 6 July 2022, the first respondent was no longer a candidate for the Borno Central District elections, and his subsequent nomination as vice presidential candidate of the second respondent for the presidential election was not multiple nomination, as there was no longer a nomination for the first respondent since his withdrawal on the 6th of July 2022. I have also a contribution of his lordship, Agim JSC. So I have endeavored to quote extensively the dicta of the laws of the Supreme Court in PDP and INEC Supra in order to show that the issue of double or even multiple nomination of the first respondent as the central candidate and vice presidential candidate of second respondent in the 25th February 2023 general election has been settled to finality. It is a judgment in rem, therefore binding on the parties to this petition and in fact the entire world, including this court. Being the judgment of the final court of the land, of this land, this Supreme Court, no person is permitted to again raise and litigate on it in any other action or proceeding. It is therefore settled and remains settled that this petition, which questions the qualifications and seeks to disqualify the third and fourth respondents from contesting and occupying the seat of President and Vice President of Nigeria on ground of double or multiple nomination of the first respondent and Vice President candidate of the second respondent on ground of double or multiple nomination of first respondent has no substance. I only wish to add that Section 35 of the Electoral Act is targeted at the candidate and not the political party. That is why it uses the terms a candidate and normally allows himself to be nominated by more than one political party or more than one constituency. That's to prove that the candidate knowingly allows himself to be so nominated. Both the intent and actual acts of nomination, that is, the mens rea and actus reus of the act prohibited, must be proved, the stipulation in the section being a penal provision. In the instant case, neither the intent nor the fact of the first respondent to allow himself to be so nominated was established. That's why His Lordship Ogumi JSC, in his contributory judgment in Exhibit X1, held as follows, I quote, by Section 31 of the Electoral Act, the first respondent, Shetima, was obliged to submit a notice of withdrawal in writing to his party, which he did, and then his party is to deliver that notice to the Commission not later than 90 days to the election. In view of the above stated position of the law on this issue and the facts of this case, there exists no animus or display of intention by the first respondent to stand as the nominated candidate of the second respondent for the vice presidential position and also the senator representing Borno Central District in the general election of 26 February 2023. There cannot be any other interpretation in the circumstances unless there is clear intention to knowingly stand as a candidate for two elective posts in the same election cycle. Jim JSC also contributed as follows, quote, the manifest intention to relinquish the earlier nomination to pave way for the nomination of another person to replace him as the party's central candidate cannot be overlooked or disregarded. To simply isolate the assumed or purported short-lived coexistence of the two nominations for treatment as multiple nomination without regard to the obvious intention of the first respondent not to be the party's candidate in elections in two constituencies is against the legislative intent of Section 35 of the Electoral Act 2022. The sequence of the occurrence of the events is not what determines the existence of multiple nomination. It is the intention, design, or purpose to hold two or more nominations as candidate for election that shows that the person so nominated knowingly did so. The second respondent did not intend that the first respondent should be its candidate for Borno Central election and its vice presidential candidate for the presidential election. The first respondent did not understand or know that he was so nominated. The word knowingly in Section 35 of the Electoral Act must be interpreted broadly to include all its literal meanings. Barton's Legal Thesaurus, 4th edition by William C. Barton at page 356, It is defined to include advisedly, deliberately, designedly, intentionally, learnedly, pointedly, purposefully, with knowledge, etc. It is clear to me, therefore, that from the oral and documentary evidence adduced by the parties on this petition, the intention and fact of knowingly allowing himself to be nominated in more than one constituency, as alleged by the petitioner against the first respondent, has not been established. In other words, both the mens rea and actus reus of the Act prohibited by Section 35 of the Electoral Act 2020 were not established. One other aspect alleged by the petitioner on his claim of invalid nomination of the third and fourth respondent is that the second respondent did not comply with Section 33 of the Electoral Act in the nomination of the first respondent as vice presidential candidate. That after the withdrawal of the fifth respondent, the second respondent should have conducted a fresh primary election within 14 days for the purpose of nominating a new vice presidential candidate. Now, Section 33 of the Electoral Act stipulates that a political party shall not be allowed to change or substitute its candidate whose name has been submitted under Section 29 of this Act, except in the case of death or withdrawal by a candidate, provided that in the case of such withdrawal or death of a candidate, the political party affected shall, within 14 days of the occurrence of the event, hold a fresh primary election to produce and submit a fresh candidate to the Commission for the election concerned. The interpretation of this provision does not, in my view, cause any difficulty as to require the application of any technical rule of construction. Therefore, a literal interpretation will suffice. It therefore means that where a political party has submitted the name of a candidate pursuant to Section 29 of the Electoral Act supra, it cannot be allowed to substitute or change that candidate except in the event of death or withdrawal of such candidate. By the proviso thereto, the political party affected is enjoined to conduct a fresh primary election for the purpose of producing a new or fresh candidate to submit to the Electoral Commission. The grounds of the petitioner here is that the fifth respondent withdrew his nomination as vice presidential candidate of the second respondent, but the second respondent did not conduct another primary election for the purpose of producing a new vice presidential candidate within the 14 days prescribed by Section 33 of the Electoral Act. It should be remembered that by Section 142, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution, a presidential candidate for election to the office of president has the sole discretion, authority, or power of nominating his associate who shall run with him in the election as vice president. The choice or nomination of vice presidential candidate is not the product of any primary election. Therefore, in my view, the requirement to conduct a fresh primary election does not apply to the nomination of a vice presidential candidate. Thus, my Lord of GJC highlighted this point in Exhibit 1 as follows. The fourth respondent was not required to buy any nomination form. He was the second respondent, APC's candidate, at the election into the office of Senator representing Borno Central District. But before the election could hold, he was nominated as the third respondent's associate, who is to occupy the office of vice president. The fourth respondent did not buy a nomination form for the said office, and most importantly, did not contest any primary election in order to emerge as APC's vice president candidate. Close of court. The petitioner in paragraph 28(2) of his petition had averred and also contended in his final address that there was a gap of about 3 weeks between the period the fifth respondent expressed his intention to withdraw and his actual withdrawal or purported nomination, thereby invalidating the nomination of third respondent, because the candidate of third respondent had lapsed and was no longer in a position to constitutionally to nominate a running mate. This contention of the petitioner is, however, misconceived. There is nothing in the Constitution which robs a presidential candidate of his right to nominate his associate, who shall be his running mate for the office of president. There is also nothing that invalidates the nomination of a new associate by a presidential candidate as his running mate after the withdrawal of a previous associate, so long as the nomination of the new associate was submitted to the first respondent 90 days before the election as mandated by Section 31 of the Electoral Act 2022. This contention of the petitioner is therefore discountenanced. It is therefore my view that the position of a person as vice presidential candidate not being subject to primary election, the provision of Section 33 of the Electoral Act 2022 would not apply. On that note, I hereby hold that the petitioner failed to prove the lone ground of his petition to the effect that the third and fourth respondents were not qualified to contest the election held on 25th February 2023 for the reason of double nomination. Having resolved the sole issue of this petition against the petitioner, this petition is held to be devoid of any merit. Well, we'll rise for just 15 minutes and continue with petition number 3 and 5. I can see Dr. Levy moving up and down. So, as an elderly person, I know what is going on.
I was wondering, sir. We just wondering, my Lord, if your brethren agree with your judgments or not.
Pardon?
I said, we're just wondering.
No, it's a consolidated judgment. They will give their contributions after we have read all the judgments.
Oh, my Lord, yes. Please. We just needed to know, sir.
Yes, they will give their.
Thank you very much, my Lord. Thank you, sir. victory.
Hear the final verdict of the election petition tribunal. So in the meantime, we're going to go for a short break. At 12 o'clock, we'll bring you the news at noon, and thereafter we'll connect to the tribunal and bring you more updates of what's happening there at the petition courts today. And after all of that, after the verdict, we'll get to talk about the verdict and a lot more of what really went down today. So keep it here. Do not change the dial. My name is Mary Onaife Edebi. We'll go for a short break now, and we'll be back by 12 for the news.
And then the executive refused to obey that statement. We should address the issue of flooding that is damaging most states in the country. 9.9 million Nigerians are living in extreme poverty.
Even the police people, they are punishing us that we are criminals. They even feel gun in my leg. Look at my leg. They didn't even allow us to talk. They are shouting, you people are criminals. You see people that want to run police station, and they let the front police station.
You do the talking, we give you that. Some who know the issue are also deceiving Nigerians and playing local politics with global issues. Spy died in Delta. U.S. pledges $1 million support. The Morning Ride Show every weekday, Monday to Friday, right here on your #1 station that gives you a voice.
In the first of the many items before the court today.
See why I called him senior advocate in journalism?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll take a short break in continue with our broadcast of this. And as we mentioned to you, we've been trying. Oh, by the way, we could also inform you that not a few issues are trending right now on X about this particular case. Number one, the PPT judgment is the #1 hashtag right now. 25% in FCT is also trending. Justice Samani earlier trended, I think, #3, but now he's trending quite down the ladder, at least about #9 or so right now. And a number of other trends. Presidential Tribunal is also trending, and several others like that. So just so we know.
Also to inform you that during the first part of the proceeding, just before the break, we had more than 24,000 views.
More than 46,000 on our dedicated stream, but we have others. Watching this live broadcast.
And I believe Senior Advocate of Journalism on the other end in Abuja, Nyota, wants to weigh in on the matter. Nyota, are you there now?
Well, I'm not sure that he is, but let's see. Most certainly when he is, he will most certainly be brought in to have a conversation with us on the matter. So we need to take a little bit of break in a moment or two, but just to let you also know that the court, the Presidential Election Petition Court, has declared that as at this moment, APM suit against the Vice President Shetima and President Tinubu has been struck out for lack of merit. The critical case made was that, look, this is supposed to be a pre-election matter and consequently should have been dealt with within 14 days from the day the course of action arose.
Actually, Ayo, we surpassed the 46,000 mark. I think that was the last time we checked. The update now is that we hit 70,000 views at the peak of the proceeding during the reading out of the judge's ruling by Justice Haruna Samani.
See?
Yeah, 70,000.